Right now, Britain is living through its fourth heat wave of the summer, and scientists are watching this one differently than the three that came before it. Not because of how hot IT is on its own, but because of what happens when a country's land and water supply and population get hit by the same extreme heat for separate times in barely 10 weeks. The Met Office confirmed the fourth heat wave on the 28th of July, with temperatures forecast to reach 35 degrees Celsius in parts of the country. A wildfire is currently burning across Tintwistle Moor in Derbyshire. More than 8 million households remain under hosepipe bans introduced during the earlier heat waves this summer. And researchers studying repeated heat events like this one say the real danger of a fourth heat wave is not the heat itself. It is what the previous three have already done to the ground, the water system, and the people living through all of it. This is the story of actually happens when one country gets hit by 4 heat waves in a single summer, and what scientists say they are specifically watching for as it unfolds. No hype, no exaggeration, just what actually happened and what the data behind it means. Drop a comment and tell me how this summer has actually felt where you are in the UK, because I read every one of these. If you want grounded weather coverage instead of panty-sea headlines, subscribe. It is free, and a like helps this reach people who need to understand this before the next one arrives. Let us go for 5,000 likes on this one. Thank you. Now let us get into it. To understand why a fourth heat wave matters more than a first one, you have to see the full sequence, because each event this summer has been layering directly on top of the last, rather than happening in isolation. The first heat wave arrived over the May bank holiday, with heat health alerts raised to amber and a study estimating around 550 tied to that event alone. The second and more severe heat wave struck in June when Norfolk recorded 37.7 degrees Celsius and the country broke its own record for the most days reaching 34 degrees in a single year. England recorded its warmest June on record, with a mean temperature of 17.1 degrees Celsius, while the UK as a whole posted its second warmest June since national records began in 1884. A further 2,200 deaths were estimated between the 18th and 28th of June, bringing the combined toll from the May and June heat waves alone to roughly 2,700 excess deaths across England and Wales. That June heat wave also broke a record that tends to get less attention than daytime highs, but matters just as much to researchers studying heat mortality. The UK, England, and Wales all surpassed their previous records for the highest average minimum June temperature by at least half a degree Celsius, meaning nights across the country failed to cool down as much as they ever had before eyeing the historical record. While Scotland equaled its own record and Northern Ireland recorded its second warmest June on record. A third heat wave followed in early July, and by the 11th of that month, more than 8 million households across southern and eastern England had been placed under bans, while Severn-Trent Water recorded the highest single-day water demand in its history. Now, on the 28th of July, the Met Office has confirmed a fourth of works, with the mercury forecast to climb to 35 degrees Celsius in parts of the country, and a wildfire already burning across Tintwistle Moor in Derbyshire as conditions dry out further. This is exactly the pattern researchers who study. Repeated, back to back. Extreme weather events say deserves closer attention than any single heat wave on its own, because heat and drought do not simply add together. They actively reinforce each other the more times they repeat within the same. Climate scientists Miriam Tanner IDE and Ruth Cerezo-Mota, who study what researchers call compound drought and heat wave events, have explained the mechanism directly. When heat waves and droughts occur together, or in close succession, the two hazards reinforce each other through land-atmosphere interactions, amplifying surface heating and soil moisture deficits, and making the combined event more intense and damaging than either hazard would be on its own. In practical terms, each heat wave this summer has pulled more moisture out of the ground through evaporation, leaving progressively drier soil behind it. Drier soil has less capacity to cool the air above it through evaporation, meaning each new heat wave arriving on top of already parched ground tends to push air temperatures higher, faster than an identical heat wave would have produced earlier in the summer before the ground had already been baked 3 separate times. That same drying process is also the direct mechanism behind wildfire risk climbing with each successive heat wave. Exactly the dynamic now playing out at Tintwistle Moor. It is worth putting that number 4 in historical context, because it is not simply an arbitrary count. The summer of 2022, itself widely described at the time as an unusually extreme UK heatwave season, produced separate heatwaves across the entire summer, a June event, a July event, and a 6-day stretch in August. And that year still went on to become the UK's warmest year on record at that point, with weather experts openly discussing whether heat waves deserve their own naming system the way winter storms already have. This year has already matched that entire season's heat wave count by late July, with more than a month of summer still remaining, And forecasters have not ruled out further heat events building into August behind this one. That same pattern of compounding, back-to-back extremes, has already produced a far heavier toll elsewhere in Europe in recent years, underscoring why researchers are watching a fourth event so closely and treating it as simply more of the same. Nature medicine researchers estimated Europe more than 62,000 heat-related deaths during the summer of 2024 alone, while a separate analysis found that by mid-September of last year, roughly 16,500 deaths across the continent may have been directly attributable to climate change, representing an estimated 68% of that summer's total heat-related mortality. Neither of those figures comes from this year's events specifically, but both illustrate the scale-repeated, compounding heat exposure across a single region can eventually reach when successive events are not treated as isolated incidents. The jet stream sitting above all of this continues to behave the same way it has all summer, and it is worth being precise about the mechanism rather than treating it as a vague background factor. A weakened, wavier jet stream, linked by researchers to a rapidly warming Arctic, narrowing the temperature contrast that normally powers it, has repeatedly allowed high-pressure ridges to push further north and stall out directly over Britain rather than moving through and breaking up the heat underneath them. It is also worth addressing a specific claim that circulated online as this pattern developed, because separating real science from misinformation matters here. A claim shared by Reform UK's Deputy Leader Richard Tice suggested that reduced air pollution was responsible for driving the recent run of heat waves, drawing on a study that did not actually include data from this summer's events. Eric Fisher, a climate scientist at ETH Zurich, directly rejected that framing when asked about it, telling reporters it was simply wrong to attribute this summer's heat waves to falling pollution levels. The distinction matters because it is part of why grounded, sourced coverage of events like this one is worth taking seriously over claims that circulate without being checked against the researchers who actually study the mechanism. Britain is also not an isolated case this summer, and understanding the wider European picture helps explain why scientists are treating repeated heat waves as a pattern worth tracking, rather than a string of coincidences. As July moves into August, meteorologists are already forecasting a major heat wave for continental Europe as well, driven by the same kind of omega block, a stalled Greek letter-shaped ridge of high pressure that trapped deadly heat over the continent back in June. Forecast models to air temperatures surging past 40 degrees Celsius across the Iberian Peninsula and France as this pattern builds, with some areas potentially reaching as high as 45 degrees. Research published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences has found that the specific atmospheric patterns responsible for locking extreme weather in place, the same blocking highs behind heat domes and, in other seasons, stalled flooding events, have very nearly tripled in frequency, part of the broader backdrop researchers point to when explaining why a summer with 4 separate heat waves in a single country is no longer as unusual as it once would have been. So what does all of this actually mean for you, particularly if you are anywhere in the UK experiencing this 4th heat wave right now? It means treating this event with real caution, even if 35 degrees does not sound as some of the peak numbers from earlier in the summer, since the ground underneath the heat wave has already been dried out by 3 previous events, meaning wildfire risk, water stress, and the pace at which temperatures climb are all starting from a more vulnerable baseline than they were back in May. It means continuing to take hosepipe restrictions seriously, since the water system has not had a genuine chance to recover between events, and Severn Trent's own record demand shows how close to the edge some regional systems have already been pushed. And it means understanding that the danger from a summer like this one is measured cumulatively rather than heat wave by heat wave, since the same excess mortality data that put May and June's combined toll, 2,700 deaths, shows exactly how much repeated exposure to extreme heat compounds over the course of a single season, rather than resetting cleanly each time the temperature briefly drops back down. It also means paying attention to temperature specifically, not just the daytime headline figure, since the same failure of nights to properly cool down that set new records back in June is precisely the pattern public health researchers consistently link to the sharpest rises in heat-related mortality, particularly for elderly people and anyone with an existing heart or respiratory condition. The honest, grounded summary is this: the United Kingdom has now experienced 4 separate heat waves within roughly 10 weeks. Summer, with the Met Office confirming the 4th on the 28th of July, as temperatures climbed toward 35 degrees Celsius and a wildfire began burning across Tintwistle Moor in Derbyshire. The combined toll from just the first 2 of those events is already estimated near 2,700 excess deaths across England and Wales, and researchers studying compound drought and heatwave events say each successive heatwave this summer has likely been intensified by the outground left behind by the ones before it, a feedback loop distinct from, but layered on top of, The same weakened jet stream pattern that has been steering blocking high pressure systems over Britain and much of Europe all season. We are going to keep tracking this as the rest of summer develops. Sourced the same way we did today, straight from the Met Office, the researchers studying compound extreme weather, and the water companies managing the strain on the ground, not recycled headlines. Subscribe so you do not miss the next update, because based on how this summer has gone so far, a fifth heat wave would not be remotely surprising. And leave that comment below. Tell me how your own area has held up through all 4 of these, because behind every one of these numbers is a firefighter on Tintwistle Moor watching moorland burn that would not have caught this easily back in May, a water engineer checking a reservoir level that has not had a real chance to recover since the first heatwave hit, and a researcher somewhere right now mapping exactly how much drier this country's soil has become with each heatwave that has rolled straight into the next one. 5,000 likes on this one. Let us go. See you in the next one.